Good evening and welcome to Uncivil Disobedience. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. My usual partner in crime, Kennedy Cooper, apologizes for not being able to make it tonight. They had a last-minute unpleasantry come up, but they will be back when they can, and they want us to all have a good show tonight, so I'll do my best. With me tonight are Jackie Poles, the co-host of Nerdolitics on Fred Hampton Left, and Brandon Buchanan, longtime friend of the show and co-host of Not Safe For Wonks on Not Safe Media.
Yeah, with Kennedy out of the building, they thought, let's send in a bigger, better substitute, and here he is.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. I'm putting on my nerd hat tonight because Go ahead.
I want to know what the nerd hat looks like.
Well, it's right here. I do have a couple of pictures in it, and it's in the. But basically, the nerd hat is the red beret for Medicare for All in whole Washington, which it only looks worse when I try to make it look better. So, but it's really, really comfortable. And it's warm this time of the year.
What's on tap tonight, Chris? What are we doing?
Well, I'm going to start off on Pulp Fiction and comic books and about how the writers love to give people with legitimate grievances a bad rap in fiction. All the way back to H.P. Lovecraft, alluding to the mixed race nature of his villains in Shadow over Innsmouth, and making it clear that it was the mixing of the fishmen and the humans that made them worse than either. And so there's these deep themes going right back into the very beginning of the sort of pulp fiction that eventually became comic books, and it's not pretty, but you have to be aware of it to be aware of how it might affect you if you're not aware of it.
I mean, you could go all the way back to like Dante's Inferno or something like that. I mean,
that's true too.
Characters having, villain characters having a surprisingly nuanced grievance is kind of bedrock to fiction. It's kind of bedrock to how we draw a little more complexity out of these archetypes. The problem is that, even as we draw complexity out of the archetypes, stories just have limits. There are beginnings and middles and ends. And what we do with those beginnings and middles and ends say a lot about who we are and what we value as a society, or at least they could potentially.
Well, and that's important. I mean, the classic social justice comic book is X-Men, where a bunch of white kids represent, well, they started out that way. They became more mixed up later on, to be fair. But they started out as a bunch of white kids who were stand-ins for...
What's wrong with them? Are they mixed up? What do they need to do to get right?
Well, I didn't want to use diverse because that sounds too cliched.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a stand-in for the civil rights.
Yeah,
in its own little awkward way. Yeah. To what degree, I mean, are the villains in X-Men, and they change.
Yes.
It's not just Magneto. People think that he's the only one. How much are they justified in their whatever bad stuff they're doing?
Well, and that's the thing, is how justified they are changes too, of course, depending on the creators. If you
really call Magneto a villain, though?
See, and that's because you could call him an anti-hero very easily.
I consider him.
And that's where he gets eventually. I mean, there are several periods in the canon where he is in some way assisting Charles Xavier with the X-Men or some other mutant team.
Yeah, they do that all the time, and they're like, "Oh, Magneto on our side," and then it turns out Magneto actually not on their side.
Well, no, that was the best part though. When Xavier went into space to be with Lilandra for a long-term period of time, and the only person he trusted to watch his students while he was gone was Magneto, because Magneto was the only person he could think of who cared about mutants as much as he did.
But okay, so I kind of have an issue with the myopic viewpoint of like Professor X good, Magneto bad, because Professor X not necessarily good and Magneto not necessarily bad.
Well, Professor X is manipulative and kind of the I don't like to appropriate the word for a white guy exactly, but Professor X is kind of the Uncle Tom of mutants.
Don't do it.
Professor X really, really, really wants the normal people to accept him.
Yeah.
And he's really, really willing to go a long way. Somebody in a conversation on Twitter said very perceptively that Professor X is a little more Booker T. Washington than Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, well, it obviously depends on, and the thing with comic characters is it always depends on what the story is. You can always take it out and reshuffle another element and take a character out, add one in, whole new story. But generally, when we're talking about that dude, just a deadbeat. He's always lying to people. He's always got somebody in the dark. He always does something to make somebody mad. And then when you find out what he did, you're like, why did you do that? You're a jerk. Kind of like Reed Richards in a lot of ways.
He's one of the X-Men.
Except nicer. He's much nicer than Reed Richards, but he makes the same dumb mistakes.
Well, the thing is that Reed Richards is less likely to make a dumb mistake himself and more likely to be cleaning up after like a Dr. Doom dumb mistake or a Mole Man dumb mistake or something like that.
Reed makes plenty of social mistakes.
That's true. Social mistakes, definitely.
And I don't know, what are we getting out of that when we talk about these people that are misunderstood? We can go all across. I mean, Marvel, DC. And lots of. Go ahead.
There's another one of those. Well, they want the right thing, but they're going about it the wrong way. Jackie and I were sort of talking about it, but it's like the one of the few DC social justice characters is Black Manta from Aquaman.
Wonder Woman,
though. Wonder Woman is very complicated. Definitely social justice, not so much a bad guy. Wonder Woman's bad guys are not much social justice bad guys.
Oh, Poison Ivy.
I think Killmonger in the MCU would probably be a better example of that.
Killmonger. Well, but see, Killmonger in the MCU, Killmonger is very, very much. Almost has all the qualities that we would like to see in a good guy, except the wanting to destroy the world part. But even then, he just wants to liberate the world.
Well, he doesn't just want to liberate them. He does. He's kind of Killmonger in the MCU is pretty much the Magneto of the MCU so far.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Where, like, yes, he wants to liberate blacks from their oppressors. However, he also wants to be the ruler.
Yes. That's true.
But I think that he initially wanted to be the ruler because he knew without him becoming the ruler, he couldn't get it done. Very much like Magneto.
Yes.
Once Magneto gets his dream and all mutants are safe, like on Genosha, and then he's the ruler. Like, if he has to step down as ruler, but the mutants stay safe, he doesn't care.
No, well, the best story ever in What If is the What If story where Dr. Doom takes over the world. He wins his fight with the Avengers in the. Well, what?
Which time? Because he's done that a couple times.
Well, this is the classic. This is a classic What If story where Dr. Doom kills the Avengers and the Fantastic Four in this big battle and takes over the world, and then spends all his time as ruler of the world, essentially fighting all the bad guys that the superheroes would have fought if he hadn't killed them to become the ruler of the world. Because apparently that's what the ruler of the world has to do, protect it from people who want to take it away from him.
Interesting.
But yeah,
that one I haven't seen, but I've seen I can't ever remember the name of the story arc, but the one where like he had everybody off on another world and he had them like fighting each other.
Secret Wars.
He lied, yeah. And he was lying to Valeria and saying that he was her dad. That's kind of messed up.
Yeah, all sorts of weird stuff.
So social justice villains in DC, Poison Ivy probably the most prominent one.
Is Swamp Thing considered a villain or a hero?
Swamp Thing is a hero.
Swamp Thing's a hero. Yeah.
Black Manta is worth talking about though, because he's very much that sort of, we're going to take a guy with a really legitimate grievance and then make him really bad. Because he wants to liberate black people, which is good. Even the authors of the comic book were not going to go out and say liberating black people was bad. And this was DC, and so they maybe might have thought that. But they weren't going to say it even in the comic book.
Chris, well, go ahead.
But the reason that he's a villain is, of course, because he wants to destroy the white Atlanteans in order to settle Atlantis with black people from above the waves.
I haven't read any Aquaman comics, so I can't comment on that. I've seen the movies, but I haven't read the Aquaman.
They sort of hint at him in the movies.
Yeah, they've racially swirled all of this in the movie, so they don't have to know that. And I would too. Let me tell you,
in the movies, Black Manta's still black. The only real difference is Arthur Curry is mixed instead of just white.
Yeah, and which is good. I mean, that's actually a good thing. And it's good that the Atlanteans, I mean, the thing I liked about, because the ultimate guy with a chip on his shoulder and a really legitimate grievance who's gone back and forth as good guy and a bad guy, of course, is Marvel's Namor, but that's a whole nother Atlantis, and we'll get to that. But Black Manta is, they had to make the Atlanteans white because in those comic book conventions, all the normal people are white because it's tremendously racist. These were the 1950s and 1960s DC comic books, which still had these totally 1930s conventions about race in all the writing, even though it was supposed to be the 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s weren't any better.
Well, in theory, you had the civil rights movement going on in the 60s.
Well, listen, unless we're going to share a list of our top 10 racist comics.
Well, that's always worth doing.
Which, I mean, look, we could. But, like, do you have when you talk a lot about, like, who's justified, who's unjustified, would you rather only see unjustified villains?
No.
Or do you want those justified villains to win more often? Like, where do you have a cultural goal for this conversation?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that the comic books we're talking about are created by white people. And the creator shapes the finished product.
Well, I think every comic book, every story tends towards reformism just because people like endings.
Certainly.
So, I mean, it's not like, once in a while someone tweets, why can't they tell a story about a true revolutionary thing where they get the guy and they did, and that's just
because proactive storytelling is tremendously hard. Yeah. And reactionary storytelling is very easy. And so what you get, David Graeber had this in an essay. It was a good essay. I didn't agree with everything, but the whole superhero genre is of necessity reactionary because the superhero is running around saving people from what happens.
Yeah, no, you don't have to add anything else to that. It makes makes some sense.
And if the superhero is proactive, then you have to tell a very different kind of story, where the world
with an ending.
Even whether there's an ending or not, it's a story that people have to work to keep up with.
Captain America.
Well, so there's a great story about what people liked and hated about Marvel Comics that just fits into the story of the people who wrote Spider-Man. For years and years and years, Spider-Man was the only character in any fiction anywhere that grew up. Spider-Man started out as a senior in high school in his first story, went through college in real time with his readers, and while his early adulthood was stretched out, he aged and matured and got older and got married and quite a few other things. And all this happened less and less in real time, of course, as time went on. But it's still more and more in keeping with some of the experiences of the people who had first started reading him. The problem is, of course, is you've left. It's very hard to onboard new readers. If everybody started reading while they were a senior in high school and loved Peter Parker and grew up with Peter Parker, then you can't ever go back and get that senior in high school experience reading that first issue of Spider-Man, which goes to the question of what we were talking about before the show started, why Shazam can't ever grow up as Billy Batson, because if Billy Batson grew up, it would be a different story.
But see, I think that the stories could be better for that. I think there could be richer stories. And then just like that Marvel ended up doing with Spider-Man, you can create new characters like Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales. And they can start all over.
What really hurts, though, is Marvel recognized to some degree what they had done and said, oh, we've left people behind. We need to find a way to onboard new people into the Spider-Man story, like maybe a teenage sidekick or a long-lost son or a clone that's still a teenager, all sorts of things that would have fit into the Spider-Man story and that would have onboarded new readers with that sophomore in high school experience. I'm sorry, senior in high school experience, and still had all the stuff that the older readers liked. Instead, the editor at the time made a specific decision to have a character in the comic snap their fingers and make Spider-Man's marriage disappear from continuity. He didn't take Spider-Man back in time and make him a senior in high school again. He didn't undo things that happened between then and now. He just made the marriage go away.
I feel like it was the marriage that made people realize that he was an adult. Because, like, if he's single, you can still think he's whatever age. Because, I mean, in comics, like, age is ambiguous. How old is Bruce Wayne? He's somewhere between 35 and 49. Like, nobody knows.
28 and 35, depending on who's drawing him.
You know? But the reason why he works and we buy him being, Batman for 20, 40 years is because he doesn't get married. Once he gets married, that's like, oh, he has responsibilities now. He's an adult. He's got to do the thing. He can't, because like a wife is not going to be okay with you leaving the bed every night to go. That's
why in the story where they married him off to another superhero.
What, Batman or Bruce Wayne?
Yes, Batman.
He didn't get married.
He didn't get married in any. He didn't get
Catwoman and they didn't. They stopped at the altar. They didn't get married.
No, I know, but there's a couple of stories. The Golden Age Batman married Kathy Kane and settled down. No, I'm sorry, married Catwoman and settled down, and his daughter was the Golden Age Huntress. And all this history that Crisis on Infinite Earths got rid of, that was so funny about these two different planets that had two different sets of superheroes who are awfully lot alike, but about 30 years separated from one another. So you've got the 60-year-old superheroes from Earth 2 and the 30-year-old superheroes from Earth 1.
Yeah, convenient.
But no, the cultural point is that if you grew up reading comic books, you got this very white liberal view of a lot of these issues that was sometimes very heavy-handed.
Well, I know. I mean, reconciliation is always a point and always a part of these stories. And when we talk about like who's the bad guy, it's usually someone who fails to reconcile with the system. And that reconciliation, no matter what happens, can be something that the hero can use to say, "Hey, I am reconciling the system so that the bad guy can be as justified as possible." But as long as they are against reconciling, they will probably do something that's hideously evil or whatever. And I mean, name a story that has the bad guy has a point. Usually by the third act, they're doing something that's so hideously evil that it's like, well, they had a point until they, threw the bus full of kids into the ocean or whatever it is.
It also, to me, I find that interesting, like going back to the MCU with Killmonger. That's what people say, but then like, look who he killed though. He killed people that he didn't really kill anybody that was innocent.
It's true.
At all. So, and yeah, he killed a lot of people. How do you think he got here?
Well, yeah.
He's not settling the score. All the people he killed, the numbers don't add up. He's still under, like, by a long shot. Mm-hmm. So, and let's face it, you can't get the kind of change that he wanted without breaking some eggs.
It's true.
And who taught him how to kill?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that they try, and that's the hard part that they have to reconcile. You want to make this point that the U.S. government teaches people how to do these horrible things, and these are bad, dangerous people. But then you also have to reconcile the fact that, the good guys sometimes work for the U.S. government. So we also have to somehow reconcile the fact that the U.S. government is with the good guys and not the bad guys.
Chris, have you seen the Suicide Squad?
I have not.
You should give it a watch.
Yeah, Suicide Squad is a pretty good.
I'm a big
everything we just said. Yeah.
Big fan of the Suicide Squad comic books because the Suicide Squad comic books were very unflinching in their willingness to accept that sometimes the government is the bad guy.
Are you okay with spoilers?
You should watch the Suicide Squad, Chris.
Yeah. Are you okay with spoilers for the movie?
I'm fine with spoilers if the audience is fine with spoilers.
It's not a spoiler to say the Suicide Squad is kind of woke about these issues.
But if he's okay with spoilers, then we can actually talk about it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, do you want, Jackie, do you really want to talk spoilers? We can if you want.
What?
Do you really want to talk spoilers, Jackie? We can if you want.
See, because if we're going to talk spoilers, then I'm going to end up talking about how Lucifer is the best Christian.
Oh, let's move on.
No, the best Christian moralistic tale ever written.
Are you talking about the comic Lucifer Morningstar?
No, I'm talking about the
Bible.
The somewhat initially somewhat disappointing, but in the end completely awesome TV series, not based on the comic book, but rather based on the characters in Sandman that the comic book was based on.
Oh, okay.
And it starts and it uses this really annoying propaganda procedural formula to get people who are not comic book people to be able to settle into something familiar. But at the same time, and it gets deeper the more it goes. It goes with these seriously, not just moral issues, but seriously Christian moral issues. And it actually is wrestling with what it means to be God, or what it means to be the devil, or what responsibilities God and the devil have that they are or are not fulfilling. And
I'm up to like season 5, I think. So
if you're watching, then I'm not going to spoil the end for you. I'm just going to say that the end is perfect.
Okay. I'm at like, where am I? I think I'm like season 5 and like
this is a lot of time spent talking about a show that we're not talking about. What are we?
Right.
Hey, who's more marginalized than the devil? And his sidekick is a demon who thinks she has no soul, and everybody hates her because they think she has no soul.
Does she have a soul?
I'm on season 5, episode 7.
Yes, she does.
Wow.
I'm fired. I'm sorry, Ace. I'm fired because I didn't finish Lucifer. Lucifer.
No fire.
You know who's really got a point? Klaus in the originals. What a guy. Just defending his family, just defending his home, unfairly
I can't stand his brothers.
That's right. You like
Rebecca was okay. I liked her better when she was the black chick, but because she was kind of whiny when she was the white chick. But I can't stand the brothers, but Klaus was my favorite. Everybody's all like, Klaus was the ultimate scapegoat. They always blamed him for everything, but without him, the whole family would have been destroyed.
Yeah,
several times over.
Multiple times. That show really fell off at the last season. I didn't even watch the last season. I knew where it was going, and I was oh no.
I was fine with the ending. I'm not gonna watch Legends because like that looks stupid. I can't stand the daughter though. His daughter is annoying as crap. Try not to cuss.
No, thank you. But those other seasons, boy, lots of just fun times. If you just like characters just screaming about revenge, it's just a soap opera. It's like a tightly plotted vampire soap opera. Lots of I shall destroy his family. Your bloodline shall perish. All that kind of that hammy scene chewing. If you like that kind of stuff, that's the show for you.
Dark Shadows for today's crowd. Hey, I watch.
Off is trash.
I watch. I was in time for Buffy the Vampire Slayer when we all thought Joss Whedon was woke, and we didn't realize what a horrible human being he was.
Did all of us?
Maybe not all of us.
Did we?
People started complaining in season 6 when Tara got killed.
He wasn't woke because I understand subtext. So when I watched his movies and TV shows, I'm like,
some of his stuff is.
To him, a strong female character is like physical strength, but like still emotionally weak. So that's not a strong character.
I agree.
Like he destroyed Black Widow. He in the MCU. His version of Black Widow is trash.
Well,
I mean, here's the thing. So there's not a lot of room. I think changing this relationship with Hawkeye to a platonic relationship and then trying to set her up. They did too many trying to do surprises in Age of Ultron.
I'm not even talking about that. Like, go back to Age of Ultron is a whole other thing. But like,
you're talking about the first Avengers.
Oh, you mean Avengers 1 Black Widow?
Yeah. Anytime Joss Whedon wrote Black Widow, trash. He did not write Black Widow as Black Widow. And the irony is, like, I'm going to say as Black Widow in the comics. The irony is he actually wrote Black Widow comics. I haven't read it because I know it was written by him. And I'm like, he's going to fuck up her character.
What movies in the MCU is Black Widow well written in besides Winter Soldier?
She
kind of her solo
all
movie.
Of the other ones that she's in. She, like, the Russo brothers wrote her as close, or not the Russo brothers, but Marcus and McFeely wrote her a lot closer to her comic book accuracy than Joss Whedon ever did.
I thought, are you talking about Iron Man 2?
Iron Man 2, Captain America, Winter Soldier, Infinity
Yeah.
War, Civil War.
Yeah, I thought
Endgame.
that I thought, all things considered, they managed to do okay with Iron Man 2. I think that the biggest problem with the stories that they were with some of the Iron Man stories that they were trying to mash together in that is they were deeply connected to a period in time, and torn away from that period in time. I'll be totally honest. The Black Widow is not a character who translates well into modern superhero fiction, because the modern superhero fan did not grow up during the Cold War, doesn't really remember the Soviet Union.
All of modern culture is just pretending. It doesn't matter. People love Old Town Road, and they weren't cowboys. They don't know how to ride a horse.
No, I'm just saying is that
it's all
the,
set
disagree.
decorating.
The Black Widow,
you have,
and it was, set in whatever Cold War era, or if it was a nitty gritty spy thriller, people will still watch it. It's just like, who's making it? Because Black Widow wasn't the kind of movie for people who, would have liked the Bourne movies or anything like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, that's why I disagree, because you have movies like Atomic Blonde, Red Sparrow, which are basically better Black Widow movies than Black Widow. And they did the exact same thing. It was essentially the same character. They were Russian spies that deflected, became, double agents, yada, yada. That's essentially Black Widow. So I don't think that is what didn't work for Black Widow. What didn't work for me about Black Widow is the characterization of her. I also didn't like the Black Widow movie. But what didn't work for me, the way Joss Whedon wrote her, is, for example, when at the end in the Avengers, when the Hulk is like freaking out, when he hulks out and he comes after her, she's literally crying on the floor.
Yeah, that's not Black Widow.
Black Widow would have gotten up. Like, Black Widow's really not afraid to die. So
this is
like when he throws her to the side. The next scene should have been her fighting the non-shield agents that had made it onto the Quinjet, or not the Quinjet, but like the helicarrier.
Yeah.
And then she should have been like, you should have just gone straight to her getting, her fighting Hawkeye. We didn't even need the scene of her Fury telling her about him, because she should have been like sneaking around the corner, taking herself, because that's Black Widow. Black Widow doesn't cry on the floor in the middle of a freaking mission.
The best comic book ever. It's a shame it didn't last very long, because they were kind of communist. But the best comic book ever was this short-lived 70s comic book called Champions of Los Angeles, where the leader of the team was the Black Widow, and they were this sort of commie superhero team that lived in this sort of soup kitchen in Los Angeles, and were trying to help people in their community rather than just make connections.
This sounds like a West Coast version of the Defenders.
It sort of was. And it had some of the same characters. When the Champions book failed, Iceman and Angel, who were in the Champions book, went straight to Defenders. But the Champions team was this LA superhero team that was Angel and Iceman from the X-Men, and Hercules, and the Ghost Rider, and Black Widow.
Be a weird.
And of course, Black Widow is the one character who everybody else feels qualified to have order them around, up to and including the demon and the demigod. So it's like,
yeah, she's right, like the Captain America of that team.
Well, it's she's like the one person everybody will listen to, very much like Captain America.
She led the Young Avengers in Secret Empire, when they decided to go after Captain America. She basically did a mini version of Red Room, because they were just kids, and it was like. It was Miles Morales, Hulkling. Who else was in? I think Miss Marvel. It was a bunch of like basically the kids at the time, and they decided to go after Steve Rogers.
Oh yeah.
And she was the leader. They were like, you know, but you're older than us. You know better than us. That's another thing. He's the one who made her young. She's not young.
Yeah.
She is just a few years younger than Bucky and Steve.
Yeah.
They were born in like 1917. She was, well, in the comics, Bucky is younger, but she was born in like 1928.
Yeah.
She was not born in 1984. And it also pissed me off, again, is very anti-feminist. It pissed me off that they took away her superhero serum. She had the same serum that Steve and Bucky did.
Yes.
It's just the Russian version.
The Russian
but they
version.
gave it in her own movie. They gave it to Alexei Shoskotov, who in the comics is not her father. He's her husband.
Yes.
And they gave it to him and had him fight Captain America, but refused to let her have it. Meanwhile, they had her doing all these death-defying stunts left and right where a normal human would have died. Just give her the damn serum. Let her be a superhero.
Her first appearances, of course, were as a bad guy in Iron Man, where she was very much the sexy vamp character. Mm-hmm. And this is why the Iron Man 2 was so hard to do right, and it's such a period piece, because the original story, the Vanko character, Vanko was the Russian scientist who invented the Crimson Dynamo suit, which was the Russian version of the Iron Man suit. And he wore the Crimson Dynamo suit to fight Iron Man, to prove that the Soviet Union was better, because, yay, Cold War. Iron Man won. Vanko defected and brought the Crimson Dynamo suit with him. And the Black Widow was the spy that the Russians sent to get his suit back. And she seduced Tony Stark, and her sidekick stole the suit and dressed up as the Crimson Dynamo and fought Iron Man, and was actually going to kill Iron Man. And Vanko, at the cost of his own life, destroyed the suit and killed the bad guy to save Tony Stark. But then, of course, he died, because that was how you reconcile the bad guy turned good to the story, is you kill him off.
You gotta kill him.
Can't have two Iron Men running around. Then Tony's not a super anymore.
But I think they brought her in well, where she was still a spy, just her shield.
Yeah.
So that to me was not the problem with Iron Man 2. I liked Iron Man 2. I think the problem with Iron Man 2 is they tried to do too many story arcs in one movie.
They were trying to combine too many things.
Like they were trying to do Demon in a Bottle, introduce Black Widow, and have introduce Whiplash, and it was just like, it was almost like three separate movies, but it didn't blend as well as it would have had they taken just one of those story arcs out.
And
but I know why they tried to do it. I think what they were trying to do was, it's the ultimate man versus himself, man versus machine, man versus, God kind of thing. So they were trying to do all of that in one movie.
Mm-hmm.
But
also
it didn't work.
They also felt like they had to do the Whiplash Black Widow thing that they did, because again, Vanko and Black Widow go together in the comic books, and
but the problem is, in that same movie they tried to also do Demon in a Bottle, and that's essentially like a movie in and of itself. Like, I feel like if they knew what they know now about like Disney Plus and everything, they would have saved that for a Disney Plus thing.
No, that makes sense.
Because it would have worked as like, say, because he always drank alcohol, but to have him, because like now on Disney Plus, like as you've seen from the shows that they've done, they are not afraid to go full depression, full grief, and I think that Demon in a Bottle would be perfect for now.
Yeah.
Because, of what they've already done, they could easily do it in a Disney Plus series, but it's too late because they killed him off.
I'm just imagining I'm just imagining a Disney Plus series with Tony Stark and Madame Mask and Obadiah Stane and the drunk story and all the other stuff that was going on around that time, and him losing his company to Obadiah Stane and going to the West Coast to start a little company with his friends and having, see, that would have worked as a TV show.
Yeah, and if they like the beginning of that, the Obadiah Stane part, they did that in the first Iron Man.
They did the first one and killed Obadiah Stane right off.
Yep. So, and they kind of, like what you said with Vanko, like Obadiah Stane was the one to show up in a suit to face off with him. So they kind of like, they always blend elements like that. And that would, the way they did one worked out, and that was fine. I think if they had taken out the demon in a bottle, the whole arc, like, because they kind of did it with like the palladium poisoning. So take out all of that for Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 ends up being a better movie. And then in Iron Man 3, instead of just having him run around without using the suit all the time and like the whole movie be about how much of an asshole he is, make it demon in a bottle. Iron Man 3 should have been demon in a bottle.
Yeah. Well, so Iron Man 3 could have been really good as Extremis. Extremis was a good story. I like the Extremis story.
Was a good story, but at the time in the MCU, they weren't ready for that story arc yet.
That's true.
I feel like that is too. It's too advanced a story arc, and then as you saw, they never did anything with it because like Extremis is like, in the comics, it's like a thing. It's part of him.
Yeah.
And it's like he can just create the suit from within him.
Exactly.
And they never really did anything with that. The closest they did was he could call the suit to him, but that's still an external suit.
Yes, it wasn't the Extremis allowing him to manifest the suit out of his own.
And that, I think that would have been better if they had done like another Iron Man, like if they done an Iron Man 4. I think 3 should have just been demon in a bottle. Get rid of the kid and that whole side plot. Get rid of the Extremis, the way that they did it. Get rid of the Mandarin because you fucked it up. Just do demon in a bottle for 3, and I probably wouldn't hate it.
Speaking of MCU characters who are getting sequels, and who were supposedly we're going to see some of the comic book stuff with Jane Foster as Thor, but Thor: Love and Thunder is coming
next year.
Yes, I'm actually I hate to admit it, but because the Team Rodent is the devil. You'll never get me to say anything good about Team Rodent.
At this point, I just give them a quarter of my paycheck.
I know. I know. They own all the intellectual property now, which of course is always their plan.
Yeah. Jane Foster as Thor, but I'm not anticipating it because it's not going to be as awesome as it was in the comic, because the two things that stuck out for me from that comic run was, number one, we didn't know who she was, because when it starts out, it's just Lady Thor. You don't know who it is. Yeah. And we already know it's Jane Foster. Like, everybody knows it's Jane Foster.
That's
so
true.
that
that
entire element is gone. And then secondly, it's not going to end the way that ended, because in the comics, she dies, and then Odin, like, she goes to Valhalla, and Odin, who couldn't stand her this entire time, was like, you fought valiantly, and let her go back. Odin's dead. So we know that Odin's not going to
all this sort of stuff. And so, and that's the thing that irritates me the most. So, and this is about just in the comics, it's one thing that's always irritated me. It's like the best redemption arc ever in the comic books was the Executioner's redemption arc, of which they show a tiny, tiny bit of in Ragnarok.
Scourge?
Yes. He was the longest running, he was like one of the first Thor bad guys. And so he was the arch enemy from very early on after Loki. His girlfriend was the girl who wanted to be Thor's girlfriend, but Thor didn't like her. So she chose Scourge instead and kept trying to get Scourge to beat up Thor, while at the same time trying to use magic to get Thor to like her and get it so Scourge would get mad at her. And it was all this whole big chick drama thing.
Now that sounds like a soap opera.
And of course she was a blonde white girl with all this going on, because they were liberal, but they understood some truths. but yeah, that was a great redemption arc, though, and then they killed him off, and then they actually had a storyline about why he couldn't come back to life, why him coming back to life would destroy the whole order of existence. But then they could just, Jane Foster, you can go back.
Well, yeah, but that's because she had proved during her time as Thor, because like what she did to prove herself was she went up against like at that time, the reason why, like, spoiler alert, the reason why Thor becomes unworthy is because Nick Fury, it's so fucked up, it's so stupid.
Nick Fury's always getting people into trouble.
Yeah. So so he had fought Gore the God Butcher, and the God Butcher was like, "You're no better. Like, you think you're noble and you're better than us. You're not. You're a warmonger and a killer just like everybody else." And he didn't believe him because he's arrogant Thor. And then one day Nick Fury whispers in his ear Gore was right. And next thing you know, he couldn't pick up the hammer anymore. Mjolnir was like, "Nope, you're not worthy." So then Jane ends up on the other side of the moon somehow, and she picks it up, and she's now Thor. And so Thor is both his name and his title.
Yeah.
And she ends up fighting off, like, I can't remember the name, but he's like some monster that like is going to end all of everything. And she fights him to the death. And she never wavers in her, like, in her fierceness or her courage. And she literally dies. And then, like, because she did that, because she fought to the death when even other Asgardians may not have been as courageous as she was, that was what made Odin go, "I guess you're all right." Basically. So that's why she was able to come back. Plus, she's not really Asgardian, so she's only a Midgardian. So her coming back isn't gonna like break the universe.
Well, he got into Valhalla because he had this huge heroic death, stopping pretty close to what happened in the comic book. Only they have the whole thing where they had the extra badass thing of actually breaking into hell and burning the ships that the dead were going to sail to Asgard to kill the living and take over for Hela. Yeah, so they burn the ships that are being built out of dead men's fingernails to delay Ragnarok.
Nafalgar?
Yes. I can't remember the name anymore.
I think it's Nafalgar. I have no idea how to pronounce it.
The ships being made out of dead men's fingernails so that the army of the dead can sail to Asgard to conquer them when Ragnarok comes. They burn them, and Scourge helps Thor and the warriors of Valhalla break into hell, and then holds the line against all of Hell's armies and Hela herself while everyone else gets away. And then it turns out that he's stuck in Hell and can't go to Valhalla even though he's earned it because Hela is being, well, the bad guy. And so Thor has to go back to Hell in order to free him. And then he goes to Valhalla. But
I mean, she has every right to keep him there. That's her domain, and he broke in.
Well, but that's the whole thing. Is that technically speaking, is again he had she was breaking the rules under the whatever they were at the time. I don't pretend to be able to follow all the twists and turns of the way Asgardian rules changed and shifted over time. It's like, is Odin alive or dead this time? Oh, he's alive again. For how long this time? We haven't decided yet.
I still think that it would have been better for Hela to be Loki's daughter, like he is in mythology.
Yes.
Because that makes more sense. And especially like Fenrir, and I can't pronounce it. I'm going to mess it up. I'm just going to say that right now. Jurgamunder, I think is the name of the... I never understood why Sleipnir fought with Odin. Literally, your brothers and sisters and your mother are on the other side. And you're like, you're just going to carry the bad guy in? Like, what?
Well, as the whole thing is this weird...
Hashtag House Loki.
But it's that whole weird notion that that Odin is somehow the good guy. Which, now that is something that they did address in the third Thor movie, which, you know, Odin isn't really the good guy.
Never was. I never... like,
but no,
like, I don't see any version of Odin being the good guy, but especially in the MCU, in the first Thor, I'm like, the villain of this movie is Odin. Like, first
true.
Movie, straight off, Odin's the bad guy.
And Odin was kind of a prick, but Odin was kind of a prick the way God is a prick in the Old Testament. It's supposed to be for everybody's own good. That was how it was in the early comics.
Just for his own ego.
Yes, well, you know, I'm not going to say that an atheist look at the Bible might not say that same thing about God in the Old Testament. I mean, people's mileage may vary. but the idea was, because you have to remember, when taking creators into account and how they came up with some of the characters they did, and how those characters are types that don't change much between different products, even when they're technically not the same character anymore. But Odin is this very specific type, which is based on this idea of the idealized good guy version of the Old Testament God, someone who does these harsh, tough things, but always for a good reason, and always has what are supposed to be everybody's best interests as he sees them at heart. Now, you can argue whether that's really good or not, but it was something that was supposed to be seen as at least understandable and noble from Jack Kirby's perspective.
I don't see... see, to me, another place where even the comics doesn't really work is like, if you were to go by Norse mythology, the Thor at the end of the movie Thor in the MCU would not be worthy.
It's true. It's true.
It's closer to the Thor at the beginning of the movie would have been worthy, because they were, you know, they have a different version of worthiness. They had different values than we did. Violence wasn't a bad thing for them. Odin would never have sent Thor away for being violent. That's what they did. They were violent. And Odin would have sent him away if he had copped out of a fight, not for joining a fight.
In Wagner, I hate citing Wagner for anything other than the obvious, but in Wagner, the one thing he gets right is that in the ring cycle, Loki is the good guy. The reason Loki has a thing against Odin is because Odin cheated and murdered the dwarves to try to get the ring. And because Odin cheated and murdered the dwarves to try to get the ring, Loki has taken it upon himself to make sure that Odin pays. It's like Loki has a really good point.
Yeah, that's and like as Guardian, I'm not pretending to be like an expert in Norse mythology. I vaguely dabble, but in Norse mythology, Loki's considered the bad guy, but if you really look at it, he's just the ultimate scapegoat. Like even in Norse mythology, because he will help them do things, and they never really give him any credit for it.
No,
and then anytime he like irritates them, he's not really like evil. He just irritates them, and then they get pissed off and yell at him.
The only time he does anything really evil is killing Balder.
Yes. And the only reason he did that was because he thought it was so ridiculous that everybody had to make an agreement not to kill him.
Yes.
Like what makes that, like, basically he's against the concept of Golden Child because that's ridiculous.
Yes.
And it is ridiculous. And I'm still Team Loki. So
no. But that was the only evil thing that the Norse mythology Loki really did was kill Balder. And that was the unforgivable thing that they punished him for.
So to me, I don't see the only part of that I think is evil is the fact that he had a blind guy do it.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Not just that, but Balder's blind brother who loves Balder and wants to join in the fun hanging out with him.
That was the messed up part.
That's
Had
really
he done it himself, I would have been like,
well, no, that's a whole different thing.
Who he had do it, you know. So that was messed up. But
that was really messed up. It's true.
Yeah, but I mean, how many times has he helped them? Like, he cut off Lady Sif's hair, then he gave them, like, he gave Odin Sleipnir. Odin got
much more out of it.
She got better hair that was like golden and shit. Like
when he traded away the apples of Idun for whatever he got from the giant, he was the one who went and stole the apples back for the Asgardians. They didn't send Thor to fight the giant. Loki went and stole the stuff back himself.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, Loki, to me, yes, he's a trickster, but he's less deceitful than Odin.
Well, and up until the Balder thing, he undoes all the bad stuff.
Yeah, like when he cut off Sif's hair, they got all those gifts. Like, that's how Thor got Mjolnir.
Yep.
They got a ton of gifts out of it, and they were still pissed at him. And I'm like, she got better hair. What? Get over it. Like, and it wasn't even like a wig, because Thor made him promise to like fix it. And the thing, like, nobody ever talks about this part of the story. Thor was pissed off because his wife wasn't as pretty. He didn't like her with the bald head. That's why he was so pissed and wanting to kill Loki.
It wasn't because Sif wanted her hair back. Mm-mm. It was because Thor didn't think she was pretty without it.
Yes. Yeah. Because basically he would screw his own wife if she didn't get her hair back. So he forced Loki to put it back.
Let's be really honest. Marvel Comics Sif is so much more badass than Norse Mythology Sif.
Norse Mythology Sif wasn't badass at all.
Exactly.
She was just a queen or like a princess that just like
Thor's wife, basically.
Yeah, she was just Thor's wife. That's it. Marvel's I don't like Marvel Sif either though. Because like all of them, both Sith and the Warriors 3, they are total simps for Thor, and they fall into the whole Golden Child bullshit of like he can do no wrong. He constantly does wrong. He's a fucking moron. Sorry, didn't mean to cuss. It just kind of came out. But anyway, he's a freaking moron.
That's fine. But yeah, and that's the whole point.
Like he messes up constantly, and you guys are like, Loki. Are you kidding me? Like what? So yeah, I can't. Because of that, I can't stand them.
I can understand that. And, you know, I got to admit that the Warriors 3 are not always my favorite either. But Sif usually doesn't put up with their shit either.
Yeah.
Not in the comics anyway.
Like I feel like all of them have an irrational hatred of Loki. And it's irrational because he's never, like, they say the things that he's done, but he's basically a jokester. Like, he's a practical joker. He's never really done anything terrible to them.
It's true.
So I think the reason they don't like Loki is they don't even know. They're too young. They're around Thor and Loki's age. They don't even know he's a frost giant. They just don't like him because Odin has his favorite, and it's Thor, and they kiss Thor's ass because they're They want that proximity to power, and they
Mhm.
can't stand Loki because he's the scapegoat. So everybody just shits on Loki. And I'm like, well, then fuck you guys. You guys are assholes. So that's
Plus,
why I can't stand any of them. The only one that I like is Frigga because she doesn't treat Loki like that.
that's true.
She's actually fair to Loki. She will call him out on this bullshit, but at the same time, she's like, just because like when Odin was really harsh, she still saw him. She's like, you're not gonna tell me not to see my son.
Yeah, it's true.
So Frigga is the only member. She's like the only Asgardian that I can stand besides like Heimdall. So it's really out of all of the Asgardians, it's Loki, Heimdall, and Frigga, and that's it. Like,
well, you know, and that's fair. That's fair. Odin really isn't likable in the MCU. That's totally true.
I mean, he's not likable in the comics either. I haven't read a lot of Thor comics.
Well, like, Loki is very much the overbearing father who wants his son to do things his way. Because it's the opposite of the movie, though. In the movie, Loki wants Thor to be worthy of ruling Asgard.
You mean Odin?
Odin wants Thor to be worthy of ruling Asgard, and while he's asleep and things like that. But in the comic book,
yeah, in the comics, Odin's not giving up that throne. He's
not giving up that throne anytime soon. He just wants Thor to spend his time in Asgard being useful to Odin instead of spending his time on Earth being useful to humans.
Yeah. One thing though, in the I like how Renee Russo was a badass in Thor: The Dark World. But in the comics, she's far more of a badass.
Oh, yeah,
she will fight with everybody. And she will take some bitches down. She is not she's almost as fierce as Thor by herself.
All of the Asgardians are more badass in the comics. It's true.
Yes.
Even the Warriors 3 are less annoying in the comics. And Sif is pretty cool in the comics, but yeah, you're right. They are kind of all simps for Thor, and especially in that first movie.
Yes. Ugh.
And it's kind of Loki's version in Ragnarok is kind of accurate from a certain point of view.
Yeah. So yeah. Basically, the punchline is Loki's awesome, Thor sucks.
Loki, another villain with a point.
Yep. See, I don't even see him as a villain.
Yeah, anti-hero again.
Yep. Basically, a villain in comics and movies is a character that has their own motivation and won't assimilate with everyone else.
That's true.
That's how you get a villain.
That's true.
Because you could have that's the difference between Magneto and Professor X. Professor X is only considered the hero because he wants to fully assimilate to the system. And Magneto is like, screw the system. Humans are trash. They're going to come after us. And Magneto was right. How many stories are there in the comics that end with Magneto having been right the whole damn time? The Sentinels came after them. They humans destroyed, humans killed off all the mutants. There are so many endings where it's yep, Magneto was right. And by the time Charles came around, it was too late. Everybody, all the mutants were dead. Magneto's the hero. He's trying to save people. Just saying. That's the way I see it.
Sheesh. But yeah, he is trying to save mutants at least. Somebody on Twitter asked me, and this is a really good question. Okay, so if Professor X wants to liberate mutants, why does he spend all his time fighting mutants who want to liberate mutants?
Because that's the whole thing. That's why I'm not a Professor X fan. Because his goal is not to liberate mutants. That's Magneto's goal.
Exactly.
Professor X's goal is to don't piss off the humans so that we can blend into society the way that they are. As opposed to Magneto saying, screw society, they're going to come for us one day, sooner or later. Let's just take out, like, Magneto doesn't always want to have mutants rule the world. Sometimes you push him and then he'll do that. But ideally, he just wants mutants to have their own place where humans will leave them the hell alone. That's all he really wants. That's Magneto's goal. That is not Professor X's goal.
The original Asteroid M story, he just, at the point where he just wants to have a safe haven for mutants where mutants can come and be safe, everybody's fine with it. And nobody actually has a problem with Magneto letting mutants come to an asteroid and be safe in a space colony. Which, if you think about it, they should have a problem with that. That's really, really dangerous. And he's putting a lot of innocent mutants' lives at risk. And the liability alone. But anyway, all that aside, they don't have a problem with him having building his own mutant world on an asteroid. But it turns out that he doesn't just want to build his own mutant world on an asteroid. He also wants to nuke Earth to make sure that humans who can't be trusted can't come after him.
The thing is, humans can't be trusted, and they will nuke that asteroid. So he's really doing is being preemptive, because he's like, you a-holes are going to do this to us. We're just going to make sure you can't do it to us. Like, we'll wipe out the threat, because they are the threat. Because the truth is, Magneto's seeing things as they are. Humans are terrified of mutants because they see the mutants as having, the mutants have powers. The mutants are different. And so humans feel inferior. They can't handle their own inferiority. So they turn that into fear. That fear means they want to eliminate the threat. They see mutants as a threat, so they want to eliminate the threat. Magneto understands human nature better than anybody in the comics. He knows that, and he's like, they're going to try to kill us because they've tried to kill him. And anytime he gets, like, how many times has Magneto just run off into the woods and been like, just leave me alone. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. And people don't leave him alone. And that's when he's like, okay, now I'm going to wreck shit. Leave him alone. Okay. That's all he wants. Just let him live his life.
If you find Magneto living with apparent amnesia as a monk in Russia, just go.
Move on.
Let him be.
Go back today. Don't write anybody. Don't text anybody. Don't tell anybody. Just move on.
Bother Magneto.
Don't bother Magneto, because it's inevitable that people try to kill him. And then he realizes, like, this is going to be, and not just him. Because, see, the thing is, he's that strong mutant that's willing to take the hits for the weaker mutants, because he knows not every mutant can handle, can physically deal with the hits that are going to come. So he's like, no, I'll be the target, but I'm going to make sure that they're safe. So he really does just have the safety of his people in mind with everything that he's doing.
Oh no, and it's a perfectly rational reason to want to nuke humanity. I totally get it. I mean, because if you were, and it's the same problem all over again in the new Krypton Superman stories, where, just leave General Zod alone on New Krypton and everything's going to be fine. Do you really want to go mess with General Zod? And of course, the U.S. military has to go mess with General Zod.
Because humans are a-holes. I'm telling you. That's the thing. Like, just let people, let the super powerful beings be the super powerful beings. Let them live in peace, and they won't mess with you. But when you go poking the bear, I don't feel bad for you when it bites your head off. I don't.
No.
That's how I feel.
And that's I think why people eventually embrace the Wolverine generation of X-Men more. Because they would rather see some X-Men who were going to cut somebody.
The thing I don't like though is in the movies he's a bit too much of a Professor X simp, because in the comics, like
he's not a Professor X simp in the comic books.
In the comics, like he has his own line of comics for a reason, because he routinely leaves the X-Men.
Yes,
he does not belong to the X-Men.
He was on the Avengers.
I was just about to say he was on the Avengers. He was part of Fantastic Four. He will join any group if he feels the need, like if they're fighting some kind of entity that like has to be fought off. Yeah, he'll join that group. But then the minute he doesn't need to be a part of that group, or the minute you piss him off, he's gone. He's the ultimate lone wolf, but he will assimilate to a team. Not that well. He's not going to assimilate too much, but he'll go along to get along to achieve the goals.
The main reason he stayed with the X-Men for years was because he had a secret, unrequited crush on Jean Grey.
Jean Grey.
Yeah. Yes. And first he was staying with the X-Men because he was in love with her. And then he was staying with the X-Men because she would have wanted him to stay with the X-Men and keep doing good and et cetera, et cetera. And it was a long time before he could let go of, secretly being in love with Jean Grey and get back to secretly being in love with Heather Hudson.
It's kind of weird with him because he's like a couple 100 years old and they're like 20 something. So
well, Wolverine, let's do the math now. Okay. Because Wolverine was supposedly in his 20s in World War II. So about
World War II or the Revolutionary War?
Wolverine, World War II.
Yeah. I thought Wolverine was like Revolutionary War age.
I don't even think.
I know he fought in World War II, but I thought he was like an adult by then.
Well, he was an adult. He was like 20 or 30 in World War II.
No, I thought like he was already like 100. I thought he was born in the 1800s. When was he born?
All right, now I got to look this up.
Now we have to look it up. Age. When Wolverine, in 1983, before he's freed by Jean Grey, he is 151 years old.
Okay.
So
Canadian military during World War One.
I knew he was older than World War II.
See, I had that wrong.
Yeah, so he was born in like the 1800s sometime.
Yep, you are right.
Yeah.
You are
because
right.
I know like he fought with Canada first and then left.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. Like he doesn't have any loyalty to a team. He has loyalty for as long as he feels like having loyalty, and then he's like, all right, that's enough. He moves on.
He was originally going to join Alpha Flight because again he was secretly in love with Heather Hudson, and he left the team because it came out that it was so in a way that stopped being so secret, and he was embarrassed and ran off in a huff rather than act like a grown-up with his two best friends in the world.
He's had a lot of love interests.
Yes. And he's never acts like a grown-up with any of them. It's like the first rule.
That's his personality. He's immature.
It's true.
It's because it's not so much he's immature. It's because with his advanced healing, he knows like unless someone also has that kind of healing, odds are this is fleeting. And especially with as many times as his memory's been erased.
Yeah.
So like I think he's probably deep down afraid that number one, whoever gets with him will get killed because they usually do.
Yeah.
And number two, so he's probably afraid to get close to someone. And then also he knows like even if they don't get killed, which they all do. Even Jean Grey, she was a powerful psychic. She still got killed. There's nobody that like survives being with Wolverine.
Worse. Killed herself like 3 different times.
So yeah, there's like, that's probably one of his fears, but then also, even if they don't get killed by someone coming after him or by him or themselves, they're like, just if he were to like marry him and settle down with old age, they're still gonna die before he does, because he's pretty much immortal. Like, he's not completely, but like, he's not gonna die of old age.
He's not going to die of old age anytime soon. Yeah.
And
no.
out of the thousands of times things, people, entities, aliens have tried to kill him,
and
with the exception of a couple times, he has died a couple times in the comics. But for the most part, he's
and
lived.
Sabretooth is older than him, so you've got so then you've got that.
Yeah. So, which is funny because like, you think they'd be buddies. You think they'd be like friends because they're the two that are gonna live the longest.
So they finally connected all the dots, and they've done it different ways in the movies. In the comic books, Sabretooth is Wolverine's father.
His father?
Yes.
When did that happen? I missed that.
I don't remember. It was not when I was reading it either. When I was reading it, they had a unspoken relationship where Sabretooth was both the arch enemy and the guy that Wolverine could not ever beat in a fair fight. If they fought in a legitimate, fair fight, Sabretooth always kicked Wolverine's ass. On the situations where Wolverine won, it was always by cheating somehow. And more often than not, something would happen that saved him, and someone else would get killed instead of him. And then Sabretooth would leave because he had killed someone else. And he couldn't really kill Wolverine anyway, but he had killed someone Wolverine cared about.
Yeah, so it says that's non-canonical. And X-Men Forever.
Are they saying that's not canonical anymore?
Yeah, it says X-Men Forever, Chris Claremont's continuation of his run on X-Men, non-canonical to the mainstream timeline, and taking place in the 161 Marvel Universe. Sabretooth is established as Wolverine's father.
Yeah, that's the one. That was where Claremont always intended to go. So I stand corrected again.
Yeah, so they did it in the comics, but it's not canon. It's a different Earth. So for those who don't know, because that was 161, which is funny because it's literally the same numbers. The comics universe is 616.
Yes.
So that was 161, which is just an inverse of the actual number. And of course, the MCU is E 999999999. It's like 1,000 nines. I don't know why.
I can't keep all those numbers straight. I admit it. I mean, because the Ultimate Universe has a number.
Yep.
And the new universe, each version of the new universe has its own number, which is just depressing. But
the reason why they do that is because
there are 2 different versions of the new universe. They're not the same place. No, it's 2 different storylines entirely.
Well, what I was going to say is like the reason why they do that is because Earth 1610 is the Ultimate Universe.
Yes.
So 1610, Earth 1610 is their thing. The reason why they do this is because Marvel, unlike DC, like DC will do like, Crisis on Infinite Earths or like the New 52. They will do a hard reset and say everything you read before doesn't matter. Everything we're saying now counts. And then as soon as people go, we hate this, then they do another hard reset.
Yes,
and they go, I know. Just kidding. The shit from before was real, and that didn't work. So, but with Marvel, they just go, okay, let's do this. Oh, you didn't like it? That was an alternate Earth. So you can still go back to that timeline. Things can still happen from that. But but it's not part of the main 616. But then they can bring elements like Miles Morales is in 616 now. He started in a different universe. I think he started in 1610, and now he's in 616.
Yes.
So Marvel doesn't do hard resets; they do soft reboots.
And they do all sorts of.
This over here. Just don't ignore that. Just this.
And then they do all sorts of in-depth retcons, like the Clone Saga, or the when you discover, the Green Goblin had a healing factor all along. So no, that's why he didn't die. He heals like Wolverine.
Yeah, so Marvel, like, they picked an interesting way to do it. Rather than doing a hard reset, they're just like, that's a different Earth.
And that works too.
Different over there.
they whenever they want to tell a story like that, they can always just, this is a different Earth. And then there are certain comic books where storylines revolved around alternate Earths or time travel to alternate futures and all sorts of weird stuff.
Yep.
Speaking of where the villains had a point, there's a New Warrior story from the 90s where a villain called the Sphinx transforms the world into a world where the United States was colonized by Egypt and Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a black world order with a Captain Assyria and Horus instead of Thor. And of course they're bad, which is just, not cool. Because if you're going, why are you deliberately doing this just to make them bad, to make a bunch of white guys freedom fighters? Yeah, sure, they're mutants, but they're still white guys. And this is suddenly supposed to tell us something important, but it's really just an excuse to make the bad guys black people. And it's
I think what it does is, you said it was the new Sphinx, right?
New Warriors. The villain was the Sphinx.
The Lady Sphinx?
It was the Lady Sphinx who did that. Yes, she created that world.
I'm gonna look that up. So I think what they do is, it's just like in They Live, the movie that Meg and I were talking about on Nerdolitics yesterday.
That's a great movie.
It's what they're doing is they're trying to basically make white people understand not necessarily have them understand like having been colonized, but the threat. So for the longest time in the US being a superpower, the only threat was Russia. So when that went away, you need to create a bigger threat. What's bigger than what's the biggest superpower? Aliens.
The problem,
in this case, have it flip it.
But the problem in this case, though, and I should have thought about it more at the time, but it's one of those things you don't notice until you learn how to spot some of the propaganda more openly. But by setting up this world where black people are in charge and white people are oppressed, you're also feeding this fantasy that exists in the mind of people who feel oppressed already, and their losses of privilege, or they're even sometimes just their apparent loss of privilege. They feel like they have less privilege because they feel like someone else is their equal now. And if they're not better than that person, then they've lost something.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeds that fantasy. It's like the white genocide fantasy you see on the weird Nazi corners of the internet that sneaks into so-called left corners of the internet through people like Vaush. Oh my gosh. But anyway, you that sort of thinking, and the reason that people are willing to give it credence are because of those sorts of cultural pressures where you see those figures cast as the bad guy in a way that's designed to be scary for white people, even when they have a good point. And the good point makes them scarier. It's important to understand that their good point is supposed to make them scarier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like that's when you try to scare people, who are like when you try to scare an apex predator, you have to come up with something that they would be truly afraid of.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what they do. I'm gonna check out that series. That series. It sounds interesting.
Now I've forgotten what I was saying. Which series was I?
Well, the New Warriors. The
Oh
latest
yeah,
thing.
New Warriors in the '90s was very interesting. Definitely, it was kind of cliche teenager stuff with characters who were a little too old to be teenagers. But all that aside, it was fun. Also, there were some things now that when I look back at them, all the marginalized people were bad guys practically. I mean, the hero, one of the main characters is this Batman clone who happens to be a black guy, but he's a rich black guy who owns an electronics company and is a genius and all this other stuff. So he's not the, it's still a specific kind of story they're telling with him, as opposed to the story they're telling in the universe where all of a sudden all the people you would think of as white in our world are black, and the white people are the underclass and they're being oppressed, and it's a very different vibe. So you don't try to make them, you normalize the hero to make them as acceptable as possible. Another rich member of the elite, because if they're a rich member of the elite, that makes them acceptable, whatever their other qualities are.
Right.
Up to a point, at least. You always have to have that you always have that separation. But up to a point, if someone's a member of the elite, that's what matters first and foremost. They're always acceptable to a certain class of people.
Well, that's kind of what They Live was about.
Yes.
Like the aliens, the way they so easily assimilated was by giving people money.
Yes.
They literally just threw money at the problem. They were like, they threw money at the problem, and they used the resources the rich had to get rid of the people who saw them. So yeah.
Which, I mean, if you can replace rich people, that's the way to go.
I'd rather get rid of capitalism altogether, personally.
Hey, no, I mean, I would rather everybody. I mean, I don't remember the math, but if you took the world's wealth and divided it by the world's population, even with all the whining that billionaires do about overpopulation, you could guarantee everyone on the planet a lifestyle similar to a six-figure income. That wouldn't be equal to a U.S. six-figure income everywhere in the world, but it would be the equivalent to a six-figure lifestyle. And, I mean, why should anybody be rich if we can make everybody comfortable? I mean, the only reason that we can't make everybody comfortable is because some people have to be rich. Because our economy is dependent on some people being rich. And worse, some people being rich is dependent on more people being poor.
Good grief. These guys have in the hundreds of billions.
Jeez. Yes.
The poorest of the billionaires has $95 billion. That was when this was written, which was in March. I'm sure he's probably hit 100 by now.
Yes.
If you were, let's just add up how much they have according to this chart. So Bezos was at 199.9.
Remember, there's some new ones since then, probably two. I'm willing to bet Rihanna isn't on that list yet. She's a billionaire now.
No one needs $1 billion.
Someone was trying to argue that she had become a billionaire without exploiting anybody. And it was, you understand that there's nobody in the fashion industry who hasn't exploited child labor, right? I mean, almost no one anyway. I won't say no one, because when you say no one, someone's always going to find one example somewhere.
No, that might actually be an accurate statement, though. Okay, so all the billionaires together, 1,263 of their billions.
Yes.
So if we add the zeros, shit, I just lost it. I hit 0 and all the zeros, like the whole thing. What did I say? 126 something?
126 billion zeros?
No, it was 1,000. The number was in the thousands. Hang on, let me add it together. Add it again. I'm just adding the top 10, not all the billionaires.
That's fine.
Just the top 10.
That's fine. I know that Bezos could solve homelessness in the United States for 20 years and still be a multimillionaire afterwards.
I say we help him to it.
And that was a few years ago. He's richer now. Bill Gates set up a foundation to give away all his money. And he's richer now than he was before he set up the foundation to give away all his money.
Wait, now I have a different number. What? Let me do this again, because somehow the number changed.
Something is wrong with the process of giving away all his money.
Right? Something failed.
Definitely.
Okay, so Gates was the last one. Here we go. After doing this math, I might want to fashion a guillotine.
I already did. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. So I was wrong the first time. I'd skipped something. 1,300. I hate it when I do that. Okay, hold up. I accidentally multiplied it. So there. 1,394.7 is how many billions they have.
That's a lot of billions.
That's a lot of billions.
How many people on the planet?
Just under 8 billion.
And that's only the top 10 billionaires. How many billionaires are there total?
Oh, I don't even know. This is just the top 10, and it's top 10 overall. And then it goes top 10 women, top 10 in China, top 10. Like, it's ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to write it down this time because I'm going to forget that number. Okay. 1,000, because I want to see how much it's going to be. 1,394.7. All right. Take that.
Divided by 8.
7, and then I'm just going to add zeros.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm at, that's billion? Yes. Actually, I'm going to multiply it by a billion. That's what I should do. Haha. Yeah. Can you tell I'm not good at math?
I have that problem myself. I'm not good at math.
There's 1,000, a million, a billion. Okay. Dear God. Okay, so the top 10 billionaires, 1,394,700,000,000. That's how much money they're worth. Now, let's look at how many people are on. How many people are in the world? How many people are on Earth? 7.6 as of 2019. 7.6 674 billion.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's go back to this number, which is just very long.
Uh-huh.
So, sheesh.
It's
All
not
right.
going to be as impressive as I thought.
We're going to divide that by 7, 6, 7, 4. Get that to billion, shall we? That's million. Billion. There we go. 181. No, this is just the top 10. This isn't all of the billionaires. It's literally just the top 10. The top 10 billionaires could give everyone on the planet $181.74.
That's what I thought.
Just the top 10.
Yes.
And that's just the top 10. That's top 10 overall. And then the second tier is the top 10 women.
Yeah.
And then the third tier is the top 10 in China. And then the top 10 in India. And then for some reason it divides it up by tech, finance, sports, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, there are lots and lots of billionaires. And I'm just saying, what if we took all their money? Like, okay, let's ask this question. How much would it cost to end homelessness in the United States? Let's see. Just curious. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it will cost $20 billion to end home. Are you freaking kidding me? It would cost a fraction of one of these douchebags. Well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't that make you mad?
Building party, because this is pissing me off.
And that's like to end homelessness for a year or 5 years or something like that.
$20 billion is all it would take. Literally,
yeah,
10% of Jeff Bezos' money.
Yeah, that's all it would take.
Tax that asshole at 99%.
Well, it's like, think about this. Elon Musk made all these grandiose promises about what he was going to do for Flint for publicity, and ended up basically not doing very much. And they got some of their pipes replaced, and other pipes that it was determined weren't damaged, weren't replaced, and really all those lead pipes need to be replaced, period. And
I mean, the Flint water crisis, I feel like it could be solved by just reversing the flow the way they did it. They basically said, we're going to take all these toxins and we're going to funnel it into your water supply. Okay, so reverse that shit.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. Problem solved. Flush out the pipes after you do so. Give them back their original source. The reason why this happened was because of capitalism.
Yeah, and because of corruption. We've got to give the way that capitalism and corruption go hand in hand credit here. Rick Snyder was a prototype for Trump. He was a really rich guy who ran for governor based on his reputation as a businessman. And he won. And then he made all these run the state like a business decisions that had a real human cost. And people have died or been seriously impaired because of decisions that Rick Snyder made.
I think it's Reagan's fault, because
Definitely.
Reagan is the one who, he's basically, even though he was just an actor, which, like, can we stop worshiping celebrities? If we'd stopped in the 80s, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. But he's the one who basically, like, it was his climate when everybody thought like that the government should be run like a business, which is false.
No.
The government is not a company, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're running it as a company.
Yes. And that's really a big part of the problem.
Yep. That's why we elected Trump in the first place, because people respected him because he's a businessman. Now, nobody went into the fact that a lot of his businesses failed. Most of them filed for bankruptcy. He didn't treat people worth a damn. It's neither here nor there. He's a billionaire. Therefore, we have this celebrity worship and this worship of wealthy people. And that's our own doom. We have to wake up and realize wealthy people do not have our interest in mind.
And both liberal Stan Lee and conservative DC Comics really did their part to keep us worshiping wealthy people. Between Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne.
I don't know about that, though, because with Bruce Wayne, definitely. But with Tony Stark, he was the villain in Civil War.
Well, he was the villain in Civil War. I totally agree with you, but not everyone sees it that way.
And I'm talking both comics and movies. He was in the movies, he was less of a villain, but in the comics, he was straight up the villain.
He was straight up villain.
He and Reed Richards were the villains in the comics.
You know who thought Tony Stark was the villain in Civil War? Thor thought Tony Stark was the villain in Civil War. One of the first things Thor does when he comes back in the Straczynski Thor series is kicks the snot out of Tony Stark and just leaves him laying in a pile of the wreckage of his armor after having gone full god on him.
It reminds me of when Steve Rogers beat the crap out of Ant-Man out of Hank Pym because he found that he beat the Wasp.
Yes.
Yeah, don't piss off that guy.
Yeah, no.
He went almost full Punisher. He beat shit out of him. It's you want to beat up on somebody? Okay. So.
Well, Captain America. Oh, this is the right thing, but the wrong way. Oh my gosh. We talked about this once. I wish I'd been able to find the issues, but there's a great Captain America subplot where he's working with the NYPD. And at the same time that he's working with the NYPD, his partner, the Falcon, who everybody knows now because of the movies, is a social worker who is working with this black militant group trying to better the conditions of people in New York. It's fairly obvious who they're supposed to be based on. Mm-hmm. There are pretty clear Black Panthers analog. I don't know why the word wasn't coming to me. But they're portrayed as ultimately being the bad guys, not because of any malice, but because they're just too impatient with the system. But then at the same time, at the same moment, they're portrayed as being the bad guys. The NYPD is portrayed as being worse. Captain America ends up protecting the rioters from the NYPD and switching sides in the middle of the conflict. And at the end, Captain America quits being a cop and says, "You can't reform this."
I don't think Captain America was ever a cop. He was a soldier, but
he tried real hard to be a cop. He tried real hard to be a cop for that story arc, and it didn't work out. He ended up siding with the rioters and protecting them from the police, because honestly, that's what a shield is for.
Yeah, which he is wont to do. I think Captain America is the most anti-imperialist hero.
Yes. Yes.
He's a hero that's anti-imperialist, and he is constantly throughout the comics and the movies.
Yes. He's telling them, you can't do this shit. I mean, even in the Avengers movie, with all its flaws, Captain America finds the hidden guns, and his first thing, he's going to Nick Fury, "You can't do this shit."
Yep.
I mean, because that's who he is.
Yeah. He doesn't like bullies.
He doesn't like bullies. He doesn't like people who are cheating. He doesn't like people who are deliberately exploiting people. I mean, Captain America and Superman are the two sort of socialist archetypes in comics. Captain America is the anarchist, and Superman is the Marxist-Leninist. Captain America is sort of bougie and artistic, but really does believe in a classless society where everybody is equal, and is against the against authority, and really likes the idea of America, but isn't really very comfortable with the reality of the American state, and is really standing up for the ideals that he believes in. While Superman is the working class guy who only uses his powers to help the collective, and never uses them in a situation where the collective doesn't actually need his powers, but at the same time always. I'm talking about the sort of canon.
I was just about to say, have you read
There's all sorts
Injustice?
of
Because
that's a whole different that's a whole different story. But there's a canon Superman who very much has always subordinated himself to the collective in the best way, without allowing himself to be used by authority in the worst way. And the first Superman bad guys in the 30s Superman comics were crooked white men in suits who were up to no good, both above and below board. And he didn't just beat them up as Superman; he exposed their skullduggery as Clark Kent, and he was really pointing out the corruption of the liberal system. What was wrong with capitalism?
I think I like Clark Kent better than Superman. I've never
Yes.
really liked Superman. I'm not a fan. I don't know why. He's
so
boring as hell to me.
Clark Kent is a heroic figure without Superman. I mean, if you look at what Clark Kent does, Clark Kent is a muckraking reporter who digs up the truth about corruption under any circumstances whatsoever, at any risk whatsoever, every bit as much as Lois Lane. He's a really heroic character, whereas Superman is, he's Superman. He helps people. That's great. But it's the absolute opposite of Batman, is that Superman is an identity that Clark Kent puts on when he needs to be Superman in order to do what Clark Kent is doing. Whereas Bruce Wayne is an identity that Batman puts on when he needs to be Bruce Wayne to do what Batman is doing.
Yeah. It's because Bruce Wayne is psychotic. Quaker Socialist. To answer your question, Quaker Socialist asked, can you describe your best idea of a superhero?
That's so hard because, like I was saying before Brandon dropped out on us, there's a fundamentally reactionary storytelling necessity to superheroes. But that's good.
What?
Superman props up poor infrastructure funding. But Batman lets us defund the police.
Huh? Batman lets us defund the police?
So Superman props up poor infrastructure funding because he saves people when bridges collapse.
Right.
Batman helps us defund the police because Gotham cops can't do their job anyway, and Batman has to do it for them.
Yeah, but he's as ineffective as they are. So if anything, he doesn't really affect the system. Like there aren't fewer cops because Batman is on the streets.
And that's part of the problem. It's true, but Batman is only necessary in a reality where the social contract. And I have to give Brandon credit for this. This is his idea originally, and I'm just running with it. But Batman can only exist in a world where the social contract has become so broken and so inverted that only someone capable of taking it on themselves to be a knight errant can possibly deal out justice, because that's the only kind of authority that people will respect. And it's a very reactionary idea, but
I mean, I feel like you could say that about just about any superhero, though.
it's true.
Because, like, you could definitely say that about Daredevil.
Yeah, well, Daredevil,
even though he doesn't have the money.
Daredevil started out very differently than he ended up. Let's just say that. Speaking of Daredevil,
that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got their powers. The ooze that gave them their powers was the same ooze that blinded Daredevil.
That's hilarious.
The radioactive ooze.
It makes perfect sense, though.
Yeah.
Speaking of Daredevil, Larry Lieber, who was Stan Lee's brother, is Stan Lee's brother. He's still alive. Stan is dead. Larry Lieber is suing Marvel Comics. He's suing Marvel Comics because he was the co-creator of several characters as a writer, characters that Stan Lee had worked on with Jack Kirby, but didn't think were important enough for him and Jack to actually work on. So he said, here, you play with this, and gave him to his brother and other artists, and they actually created the characters that ended up in the comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all been treated as part of the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby legacy, despite Stan and Jack having relatively little to do with some of the characters.
Yeah. It's kind of like Bill Finger.
Yeah, nobody gives Bill Finger
the guy
credit.
who essentially created Batman.
Yes. Jerry Robinson pretty much said that Bob Kane stole credit for everything good about Batman from Bill Finger.
Mm-hmm. There's a
Jerry
documentary
Robinson
on
hated
Netflix.
Bob
It's
Kane,
called
so
Batman and Bill. It's a really good exploration into the whole situation about that. And it has a happy ending because it ends with Batman v Superman with based on characters created by Bill Finger and the other dude, I can't remember his name even though you just said it.
Jerry Siegel.
So yeah, but it's like that was a really good that was like a wholesome ending. Even though he's dead, he still got the credit.
Oh, definitely.
And his I think his granddaughter. I don't even know if it's his daughter. It's either his daughter or his granddaughter. They ended up getting the money for the
Jerry Siegel.
Bill Finger actually died poor.
Yeah, Jerry Siegel died poor. Jack Kirby died. He was rich in waiting because he had won a case, but Marvel had appealed it, and then he died, and so his estate had to go on with the case.
I definitely think that those creators deserve money for their creation. I don't know about taking them away, like taking the rights away from the companies that have them.
So
I would just say,
here's where
them
things
their,
get
just like with Bill Finger, give them their due, give them their money.
This is where things get interesting because nobody's actually going to take these characters away from Marvel. Because it's very important to remember that in the end, the Jack Kirby estate won. And in the end, the Jerry Siegel estate won against DC for over Superman. And in both cases...
Finger won, too.
Yes. And
they all won after they died, though.
But even beyond that, in every one of those cases... the people who won the rights just turned around and sold or leased those rights right back to the same creators, and nothing actually changed because of those court cases, except that now the families of those people got their share of the money. Now,
that's what I want to happen. I feel like they should get their fair share.
Now, we can make an argument, and I think a fair argument can be made about whether children or grandchildren should really get money that was earned by a father or a grandfather in a situation where they didn't do the work and they're simply inheriting the property right. As someone who is against the property right existing in the first place, I don't necessarily think anybody should be getting millions of dollars for that. Now, that said, in a world where the property right exists and where we allow that property right to be inherited, then the family has a legal right. Those are the rules under which we're playing, and they're going. But nothing's really going to change. It's just going to be a matter of more people getting more of the money
for those families.
Yeah.
Like I think that they should get it because even though you said like these people aren't the ones who created those characters, but think about it like reparations. If those men had been properly paid when they were alive, their children's lives would have been better, which means their grandchildren's lives would have been better. But they never got that money, so now it's due to their state, and it's basically like making right. It's a financial way of making right what was wrong, but you can't really right what was wrong because that person's not here anymore.
But it's restorative justice, such as is possible in a capitalist society.
Yes.
And that has to be acknowledged. And Larry Lieber, I support 100%. He was someone who was done wrong by Marvel and even by his brother. His brother basically gave him all the crap work that he didn't want to do and said, hey, you have to make this sell. And so a lot of really bad Iron Man stories were written by Larry Lieber and not Stan Lee. Not because they would have been better if Stan Lee had written them. They wouldn't have been. But because Stan Lee did not want to be bothered writing bad Iron Man stories.
I mean, that's what happens when you're the head of the company, because Stan Lee was the head of Marvel for ages.
Yes. And he became the head of the company, though he wasn't yet at that point. He had a lot of power, but he wasn't quite head of the company yet. He had creative control, though, and that's what mattered.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it's a good time to ask about final thoughts. I know we've wandered a little bit. I'll just get you go ahead and go first.
I don't really have any final thoughts. Like I just kind of say stuff as it comes up. So
I'll just go ahead and circle the wagon back to the original point, which is that our culture kind of wants people to be afraid of people with a good point.
Yes.
And sometimes you really have to listen to what people who society is telling you are the bad guys are saying to understand who the good guys and bad guys really are.
Yes.
And on the one hand, I think comic books helped teach me that. But on the other hand, I don't know if that was really what they were intending to teach. And it feels like a lot of people really did get the more heavy-handed liberal lesson about, well, this is definitely the right idea, but you've got to do it the right way. Because, I mean, Stan Lee was like the stereotypical 70s liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And went out of his way to be so on purpose as part of his marketing gimmick. For good or ill. I'm not a Stan Lee hater.
Apparently, rabbit holes are your thing, according to Quaker Socialist.
Yes. Yes, that's true. And
rabbit holes are wonderful.
And
well, thank you for having me on.
thank you for joining me. I'm sorry if we weren't really structured, but I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, I'm not. We at Nerdolitics are trying our best to become structured, but we didn't start that way. We definitely were like, we're the ADD podcast. So, but we're trying. We're trying to like the.
Well, I will admit, and I'm not ashamed to admit this on air. I was trying to find a part of an episode to clip so that I could share it with someone as part of a joint project. And I was supposed to be able to provide so many clips a week. And I was going through the episodes and I realized to myself, we just talk and talk and talk, and there really isn't anything to just clip.
Yeah, that's
for
why
which I apologize, folks. That's totally on me.
We started trying to come up with a structure of like 30 in an hour. So the first 30 minutes is current events because we always want to talk about like whatever just happened. So we're like, okay, let's just make that news be like the first 30. And then the next 30 is what we watched, which right now is Marvel's What If. And it's usually something Marvel because Marvel is literally like back to back this year.
Yes.
So it's usually Marvel. It's usually a Marvel, like a Disney Plus, not necessarily Marvel. It's usually a Disney Plus series. Because for a while it was Loki, for a while it was The Bad Batch. And then the last hour is whatever the thing says, like that's the movie or comic or TV show that we're going to talk about. And so we try, we fail, but we try to stay like within that 30 in an hour. So we're getting better. So,
well, I do want to thank you again for coming on. I had a great time. I hope you have a great night. I hope everybody has a great night.
Yes. And hi, everybody in the chat. I see Sonia's here. I think Sonia has like a pager and like there's like a bat signal, but it's like the jack signal. So anywhere I pop up, she's there.
Well, that's great. I love it.
Of course, that's me and my ego. She probably just watches your show.
I don't know. Quaker Socialist watches my show, but I know Quaker Socialist also loves also loves Fred Hampton Left completely. So
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, she watches our show too, but she was also deliberately here tonight because she knew who else was going to be here tonight.
You don't have to massage my ego. I know she wasn't here just for me.
No, also for Brandon. I will admit it, also for Brandon.
Yeah, he was here a good 5 minutes.
Even 10, maybe.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't piss him off. Yeah. I'm going to have to find out now. But thanks again, folks. Everybody have a great evening. And we'll tweet at you.